Thank you for tuning into the Radicards podcast on radicards.com. I'm your host, Patrick Greeno, and Ryan and I are going to be talking about some points that, relate to the hobby and sports. So, Ryan, why don't you introduce us with your recent meeting of Jose Canseco?
Absolutely. This past Saturday, I got to meet Jose Canseco for the second time in my life. I believe I discussed this on a past podcast. I met Jose Canseco at spring training 1999. He was a spring training invite for the Angels, and my dad and I helped him program his new cell phone that had a voice activation feature that was new at the time. And my dad happened to have the same phone, so we kind of walked him through it a little bit. So fast forward 20 years to 2019, and I got to see him at a local hobby shop. It was a fun autograph signing. Dave Stewart, Clyde Wright were also in attendance. I was focused on Canseco, so it was fun. Got to shake his hand briefly, and his autograph isn't the most exciting thing in the world, but I do like autograph baseballs. I'm kind of a sucker. So at the right price, given the right opportunity, I'm happy to make that happen. And it was fun.
Yeah, man, that's really cool. I've met Canseco 4 times, and always a pleasure to be able to meet him and get something signed. It's just he's such an icon of my youth. And so he's always going to be like I always have a lot of respect for Canseco for a lot of different reasons, but one in just the sense that like I always remember being a kid and being like in awe of Canseco and his cards and just kind of what he stood for in the hobby. And so it's really cool that he still does signings and he's still very available and he's a good dude. I'm glad that you got to meet him again. I've been to the place that you met him, at least their old location anywhere. I think it was the first time I met him was there, and then I think I went back and met him at another place, another shop, and then 2 different times at the 2017 National. He makes himself very accessible, and I really respect him for that. It's really cool.
Yes, he does. And those experiences are always kind of fun because you get to meet other people that have similar interests to you, obviously. Mm-hmm. And the guy in front of me in line had this really cool, what looked like a custom poster, is maybe like a 1 foot by 2 foot poster that said Dodgers World Series champion. And his project was to get everybody from, I want to say the 1981 World Series to sign that poster.
Wow.
The last time the Dodgers won.
Yeah.
So Dave Stewart was on that team. So he was there for Dave Stewart. I was there for Canseco, but we were looking. I mean, he has like Tommy Lasorda. He's got Mike Scioscia, Steve Sachs, all these crazy Dodgers.
Right.
And
Valenzuela.
Yep, Valenzuela. So we were talking about his kind of past and his experiences getting autographs. He was much more of a autograph hunter, and I'm more of a card collector, so we were sort of comparing notes about how the two worlds combine. And he has a lot of experience, waiting after games in Dodger Stadium parking lot. He knows like who signs, who doesn't sign, who's really nice, who's a jerk. So it's fun just to meet that kind of people. And if you go to any of these sort of hobby sports related events on your own, don't be afraid to strike up conversation with people around you, because I'd say for the most part, people in the hobby are friendly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, also, don't be afraid to talk to the people who are responsible for signing autographs, like the celebrities or whoever, because they're people too, and so just like you and I, they just happen to maybe make more money or have more notoriety for a different reason, and so I don't have a problem going up to like millionaires and striking up conversation. Hey, you're Richard Branson. Let's talk about Virgin, media or whatever. And so it's like, I like that, and usually when you're just normal, you're not like obsessing over them. They respond in a normal way. And so I've kind of understood that. Like when I meet a pro athlete, it's like, hey man, what was the hardest trick you had to learn recently or something? Like I met Shaun White last year. I skated with him at a skate park. He just showed up at the skate park I was skating, and we all skated together. And it was the coolest thing.
Nice.
I was like, I
That's
was like,
awesome.
yeah, it was really cool. I was like, Sean, what was the most recent trick you had the most trouble with? And he's like, a 1080. I was like, on a skateboard? He's like, yeah, I almost landed. I just slipped at the bottom. I was like, it's incredible.
That's
But
insane.
yeah, and so like just talking to them, not like wanting anything from them, but just talking to them like they're people.
Yep.
Um, I think that people they receive that well. It's easier for them to like realize, hey, we're just a couple of guys skateboarding. One of them happens to be really well known, and then there's Sean White. No, just kidding. No. There's Sean White, of course, and there's like really nice guy, and it was really nice to talk to him, just like he was another skateboarder at the skate park. So that was a lot. That was really cool. But I've met many pro athletes over my tenure, and pro ball players, and pro bunch of different types of professional people. And so I never had a conversation with Jose Canseco like normal, but I would anticipate that he's pretty easy to talk to if I had a chance to just have a conversation with the guy, and just have a normal, like, so what are you working on right now? Like, what's going on? That's how when I met Dwyer Brown from Field of Dreams, I just talked to him like he was just another guy at the show, and it was a really well received interaction. And with card guys, it's like that too. Like, don't be afraid to just talk to your fellow hobbyists. We're all kind of peers in a way because we all congregate around the same sort of stuff, cards and memorabilia and sports, and so it's an easy in. Like we're kind of all like family members in that way, and I like that about the hobby. Even the guys that don't like me or for one reason or another, like we're all just kind of there, part of the hobby ethos, and so I have a lot of respect for sort of everybody for different reasons, and so I like the camaraderie that exists in the hobby. It's cool.
Very cool.
Yeah, man. Thanks. Let's move on to the shift. Is something we want to talk about. We'd sort of been kind of mulling over this concept for a while to discuss because it's relatively new in the sport of baseball. So if you're unfamiliar with the shift, I recently read Keith Law's Smart Baseball, which you should read, by the way. I'll probably have a link below in YouTube and then also on the blog, so you can just click through and check out this book. It's a really great one. Keith Laws talks about the shift in his book, and essentially what it is predicting outcomes from hitters and positioning your players on the field to accommodate or anticipate where those balls will land so you can catch them. So, for example, you might put out different outfielders or add an outfielder or move your outfielders to one side of the field as opposed to the other, anticipating that you have data on this hitter that usually hits into the right field, at a statistically significant number of based on their plate appearances. And so you might position fielders on the right side of the field. You might also add a fourth outfielder with the anticipation of having a fourth outfielder will allow you to increases the chances of you catching the ball that is anticipated to be hit in that direction. And so there was one instance where I think Chris Bryant was assigned to go to the outfield to be that fourth outfielder in anticipation of where the ball would be hit by said batter. And so that's essentially what the shift is. It's positioning your fielders in a way that anticipates batter outcome so that you can increase your probabilities of making outs for the opposing team.
Yeah, and there's a particular shift that people are very riled up about, and that's the infield shift, putting 3 infielders on the right side of the diamond because you have a left-handed batter who's got a high percentage of hard hit ground balls to that side of the field.
So you're talking about a shortstop that is on between first and second as opposed to second and third.
Yeah, so you have first baseman, second baseman, shortstop, all sort of platooning the one side of the diamond.
So you're saying that you're not adding a second shortstop, you're just assigning that shortstop that you would have from second to third to first to second, because you're anticipating where that left-handed hitter is going to hit a ball.
Yeah, and you're risking the fact that now you're leaving your third baseman to essentially cover half of the diamond, but you're pretty sure that the ball's not going to even go over there in the first place. So That's why you call the shift, and people are kind of upset about it. I think it's just part of the game. It's a great strategy, and it takes advantage of sort of one trick pony hitters that pull the ball constantly.
Yeah.
And if you go to any baseball game, minor league, major league, and you watch in between hitters, you'll see the bench coach repositioning the outfielders, the infielders, or you'll just see the players themselves repositioning themselves.
Of course.
Taking a couple steps here, right, left, back, forward.
Right.
And those couple steps can mean a lot depending on where the balls hit. And I think the infield shift is just a very extreme example, so people are starting to take notice of that.
Yeah.
And there's a movement to ban the shift, and it's like, where does it stop? If you're going to ban that, does that mean players can only move? Defensive players can only move within a certain area? I mean, like, where does it end? So
it's just, look, we got the teams are using analytics. What they're trying to do is predict outcomes for players based on, their responses for these kinds of personality tests and these kinds of response rates. They're trying to, predict player value, and so they take these things to the draft based on this information, like to help them to find the right kind of players. This also translates to outcome prediction on the field as well. So it's just they're just where we are strategically in baseball after 150 years. We've gotten to a place now where we're basing everything on statistics and numbers, and what's the likelihood of situation X happening with situation Y variables. And so I don't have a problem with the shift. I think it's just the normal course of where we are in baseball and strategy. And it's just kind of the current way of baseball is different than it was 10 years ago, as opposed to even 10 years beyond that. It's just, we're just at a different place now where baseball is just played differently now. I mean, it's essentially still the same game we always grew up loving. We're just seeing more strategic moves that are implemented in different ways that we haven't seen before. So this is just the next step in where baseball is headed, incrementally speaking.
Yeah, and speaking of watching the same game that we've always loved, the book Smart Baseball, which I'm like halfway through, the author does a really good job about explaining historical context behind certain stats and how some stats we're using today have been used for 150 years. They're super antiquated. And then some stats that were used 150 years ago were quickly thrown away because they were not very useful. Mm-hmm. But he goes through how the rules have changed throughout the game. Obviously, back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, there were some more wacky rules going on. But he gives great historical context for every sort of argument and position he makes.
Right.
So it's not only a kind of like sabermetrics stats kind of nerdy baseball kind of book. It's like a cool historical kind of trivia book as well. So if you're a baseball fan and you're not really into like the sabermetric sort of side of baseball, I think you'd still enjoy this book a lot.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I mean, it's a mathy book, so expect for your brain to process data as you're reading. It's a bit of an exercise, a mental workout, but it's a good one, and I would recommend it to anybody interested in learning more about the game. So good stuff. I'm glad we got to talk about that. Moving on, maybe some of you saw this. I only saw this sort of like, I don't know, tertiarily through like the grapevine, and then read and heard a little bit more about it. But 1997 Metal Universe Emerald PMG Jordan was listed and then pulled because it was like super shilled, and it went to like over $500,000, and then so it's been pulled. It's going to be relisted on probably the next pass. And so I saw this card in person at the 2017 National. Really cool card in hand. Really, really just incredible piece. And people like give it a hard time because of it's not in great shape. I was like, well, fine, wait for the next one of these to come along and then buy that one. Like, who cares? The foil goes to the edges, so it's susceptible to chipping and things. Those PMGs are just like that. So
Yes.
it's pretty normal stuff, but really fantastic card. I published an article about these, and I have almost the whole set of images of the Emeralds from '97 PMG for basketball. So you can go on Radicards and just find it. It's the whole gallery there. There's a couple cards missing, but really cool stuff. You should keep an eye on this auction once it's passes through. I'm sure I'll share a link to it on one of the channels somewhere because it's a notable auction, and it's a great card from an awesome set. And if you don't know the Emeralds, the PMGs for basketball, the first 10 were printed in green, and the remaining 90 of the same 100 print run were the red ones. Really cool stuff. I like seeing this kind of thing, and Jordan stuff always floors me. Like the end prices on these cards are just, I mean, they're ludicrous. They really are.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad we got to talk about this. Do you have any thoughts on this one, Ryan?
So I think this card is also, or I guess I should say this listing is an example of why high-end auction houses exist, because eBay can be kind of the Wild West sometimes. You know,
Yeah.
you throw something up there, people can chill the bid, all sorts of wacky stuff can happen.
Right.
And that's exactly what occurred with this particular listing. And luckily the seller was aware enough to say, okay, hold on, let's take a step back and let's rethink this a little bit. So they're going to relist it on eBay, but it's going to be more of a controlled listing. I think they have some mechanism to make contact with the seller before you actually submit a bid, so they can sort of vet every bid. But that's why you see there's all these great auction houses around the country that have only high-end stuff, because the seller, whoever's consigning the item, they don't want this sort of thing to happen, because it can ultimately affect the price and
right.
who ends up getting the card. So it's unfortunate that happened, but it was kind of a cool lesson to learn, and to see how the seller handled the situation.
Right.
I don't think a lot of sellers on eBay, they might not pay that much attention to who's bidding and how much they're bidding and the frequency of bids and all that. But yeah, really, a really amazing card. I'd never seen one listed ever. I've never seen one in person. I'd say, I mean, Jordan he's probably like one of the most collectible players just because of the era he played in the 90s.
Well, it's more than that.
So many amazing cards.
It's more than that, though. It's championships. I mean, he's the greatest basketball player of all time. Like he played into time when obviously these high-end inserts were being printed, but also just his prominence as being Jordan. He's not just a player; he's a brand. He's kind of like, he's a legend, and so I think he is the most collected of all players in all sports.
Totally, yeah. And we're lucky that if you can imagine for a second in your mind's eye, two lines intersecting. One line is the career of Michael Jordan, and the other line is the hobby in the 90s. And they both just collide at such an amazing point. And I'd say like top 5 Jordan cards, this one has to be in there. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, this is a big card. There are a lot of super elusive unicorns for Jordan in the 90s. The 98 EX Now, that's going to be a monster and a half. I've never seen one at auction, although I've seen a scan of the card. That one would break in serious 6-figure numbers. I'm certain of it. But yeah, this one being a big one. There's super low serial numbered cards below, in the 2 figures and less. Like especially you can get down like the 10 and less. That's when it starts to get really gnarly. But this is a big card. Now I can't confirm if the one I saw at the 2017 National was the exact one of this one. I don't know the serial number on the one I saw as opposed to this one. I think the one I saw was 1 of 100, making it the first of the 10. But I can't confirm. I can't remember. So this might be another of the 10, or another of the remaining 9, if you will, of the Emeralds. These cards they're monsters. They really are. And like I said, we talked about this in previous podcasts. We kind of wish that baseball had these. I wish that Metal Universe did these for baseball. They're so cool that kind of missed that.
Yes.
But really cool stuff. I'm glad we got to talk about it because Such a big monster card. And what a cool set. The Metal Universe with all those cool, like, character style cartoon backgrounds and the player sort of like superimposed into the background. It's just such a great set for so many different reasons. So there you have it. 1997 Metal Universe PMG, the Emerald Jordan, was listed and pulled after lots of shilling. Now, I've bid on many and won many things from PWCC over the years. I'm a repeat customer. And some of the stuff I've bid on has been shilled. And then I'll reach out and the person will, the customer service rep, I'll let them know, like, hey, this was shilled. Can you run this again and see if I can get it for, an actual market value? And they're like, yeah, that's fine. So they'll relist it and I'll get it for, at least this happened one time, I got it for like $10 less because there was less shilling. And the second time I didn't make a deal about it. I was like, just expect it at some of these bigger auction houses, you're going to get some amount of shilling. It's an expectation. It's not the auction house's fault. I want to make that very clear. It's almost just like something that auction houses have to deal with. They have to find ways to managing it. So I discourage people from putting any blame on auction houses for shill bidding. It's not their fault. Just know that it's just something that all auction houses have to manage and deal with and find a way to minimize it as much as possible. So just want to make that a point. But moving on here, let's talk about the dangers of putting your signed cards in light, like cases and, on display in your office, like on like little stands and things.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's get one thing straight here. Light and ink, they don't go well together over time. Okay, when you put anything that has ink on it in light and let it live there for a while, the ink will fade or deteriorate in some way. Even if you have it, I mean, you could avoid that by having like UV protected cases, like Ultra Pro makes those cubes for baseballs. I use them. Anything that's signed should be behind something that's UV protected. But just if you want to just dodge all that nonsense altogether with cards, just keep your signed cards, in a dark place doesn't have minimal moisture, if any at all. Like try to minimize moisture as much as possible. But keep them in boxes and closets. Like put the stuff that I would encourage people to put out is not signed cards, but cards that don't have any ink on them at all. I'm not the type that ever puts any cards on display. It's just not my style. But because I know what light does to just color over the course of time, so light exposure. If you're putting them in showcases, you might see some vendors having like pieces of tape or something over the cards because they don't want the light to hit the ink. So I've seen various cards that I grew up loving that are now super, super faded because in the 90s, this wasn't like mainstream thinking. And so a lot of the stuff that I grew up with that was pack issued from the early to mid to late 90s can be found now like super faded out. So, and you just know it was in a showcase for a long time. I've bought a lot of this stuff over the years. I have faded autographs from whatever. And so I've seen this compared side by side. And I even have I have a framed Frank Thomas picture that it wasn't until like 3 years after owning it that I discovered that it has an autograph on it that's so faded you can't even really see it.
Oh man.
Yeah. I thought it was just a picture and I was like, this is a cool framed item. And it was actually at the shop at which I used to work, Ryan, and the owner I asked him about, I was like, what do you want for that? He's like, oh, it's $20. I'm like, it's a framed item. It probably cost me $20 to get the frame alone. Like, I'm going to just grab it. And it's actually autographed, and I have it hung up in my office, but I don't care now because it's like it's so faded. It doesn't matter. It's just a picture at this part. Yeah. And I had to really look closely to notice there's like a little hairline from the ink left over. That's all it was because it was sitting in a showcase for 20 years, like a long time. Maybe not 20 years, probably actually like 15 years, I'd say. But whatever the case is that, it sat under light for so long. It just the autograph went to nothing. It went away entirely. Like it's gone. Yeah. So I say every now and then I'll find something on eBay and that's so faded. You have to just realize the resale on faded autographs is very low. So if you have something really high end and you want to maintain its investment potential, keep it out of the light at all costs. Like just don't put it under light. Even if it's artificial light, just keep it away from light. But that's just as somebody who pays really close attention to preservation of cards and memorabilia and things. I have to note this on signed stuff. So, Ryan, thoughts?
Yeah, I totally agree. I met Nomar Garcia Parra when I was a kid at Angel Stadium, and I got his autograph. And I think he even wrote something to the effect of like, "Hey Ryan, thanks for being a fan," something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So cool inscription. But as I got older, the card just sort of sat in the ball sort of sat in my room, and it faded over time. And that was probably like one of my favorite autograph pieces. And it's a hard lesson to learn. I also used a crappy pen. That was another lesson to learn. But the point is,
he used a crayon.
Yeah, you used a crayon. Yeah, you got to protect the big autographs and
any autographs.
I know that it looks really cool to display your signed pieces. I'm sort of in your camp. I don't really display my cards at all. I display some autograph balls, but I do have the UV protected cases.
Yeah.
But yeah, but even if I had a huge signed ball, let's say like Mickey Mantle, for example.
Yeah.
Even if I had the UV protected case, I would still not display it.
Well, here's the thing. So my mom in '92, we were visiting Hawaii, my family, and my mom at a card shop, she bought a Mickey Mantle signed ball for $75, and I have it here in my office because I'm keeping them for my mother because otherwise they just end up in a closet. So I was like, Mom, I'm just going to display them in my office, and if you want them back, just let me know. But I bought a UV protected ball and replaced the case. All the balls that I have that are signed in my office, they're in UV cubes because I figured like they're not exposed to any sunlight. There's minimal artificial light anywhere near them anyway. And so I think in that case, in these set of circumstances, it's okay to do that. Balls you can get away with because of the UV protected cubes that are available. But with signed cards, I've seen more of that stuff as being like a threat in a lot of ways, but also just more stuff to dust off that how much housework do you really want to do, and so
sure.
And that stuff tips over, it falls over easily. It doesn't like ball cubes, they stack really well. They're not easily like they're sturdy. They're like architecturally sound. Whereas like a stand with like a PSA case, if you touch something wrong, it's like dominoes. Everything just falls over, and then you got to deal with putting them back up, and you're like, oh my gosh, it tipped over, and the card inside like shuffled around about. Like I got to make sure it's still good. Like I don't want to deal with any of that. Like none of it. So I file everything in 2-row, graded card boxes, and things get housed in a locked, safe essentially. And so it's in my own collection, I just don't prefer to put on cards on display in any capacity whatsoever, unless they're like junk wax commons that are framed inside of like a frame talking about the player or something. I have a Griffey thing from when I got one back in like the early 90s. I just kept it, and I just put in a couple of like low end 91 cards in there just because I don't really care about the cards. It's just the cards are supplementary to what the framed item theme is, and so I'm not telling collectors or listeners to do X, Y, and Z with their collections. I'm just saying it would be wise to keep your signed items out of light's exposure in any capacity, where it be natural or artificial, but especially natural light. And if you're going to put them under artificial light, just make sure to get UV protected glass or plastic just to protect those autographs the best way you can.
Absolutely.
So
don't leave them out in the sun on a hot day.
Right. Yeah. Moving on here. So on eBay, you might have seen what are called ACEO cards, which are essentially custom-made cards by artists, I guess, that are just anybody,
This is an interesting topic. I had to look it up for myself.
All right. It stands for Art Card Originals and Editions. Or it could be Art Card Editions and Originals if you want to like organize the acronym accordingly.
Right.
But They're not licensed. They're essentially illegal because they're not licensed. They're like modern day broders, right? And some of these are actually considered counterfeits because they're exact replicas of the originals. I would stay far, far away from them, especially with high end, high dollar cards. Let's talk about this for a minute. Significant cards should always only be purchased as graded examples because you can fend away on a higher probability the chance of buying fakes, and so you could save money, right? So like the 86 Fleer Jordan, the 84 Fleer Update Clemens, even the 85 Topps McGuire, the 86 Donruss Canseco. Granted, you see a lot less counterfeits of that now, but they exist. I have one. The 84 Donruss Mattingly, and so certain cards are susceptible to being faked because of their value. And so that's another conversation. That's beyond the custom card thing. That's just protecting your investment, protecting your purchase by buying an authenticated version of the card. Now, ACEO are custom-made cards, and sometimes they could be exact replicas of the originals. Like Tom Brady stuff right now is really hot, and you can find in any number of any day ACEO cards, using designs from like 89 Donruss, and they've got a modern picture of Brady on it. These are all illegal cards because the people producing them don't have the license approval to produce these images on these cards because they're using team logos and team names. Whenever you're doing that and selling them for profit, you're actually breaking the law by doing that. And I'm not even an attorney. I can't even give out legal advice, but it would be my understanding that because you don't have the right or the permission, the approval to do that, and you're profiteering off of it, it would be considered illegal. Ryan, thoughts?
Yeah, it's very confusing. And if you go on eBay and you look up ACEO and any player, like I just looked up Michael Jordan, for example.
Yeah.
And there's all sorts of nonsense on here. It can be very confusing to someone that doesn't quite know what's going on.
Right.
And ACEO, maybe they think it's like an acronym for a product name or something. And the first thing I thought of when I was researching this was the idea of the reprint, because you do see that a lot. You see reprints of famous cards.
They're not okay. Real quick, Ryan. I have to distinguish between a reprint and a counterfeit. These are two separate things.
That's what I wanted to distinguish against, was because, so they've been reprinting cards for many years. They're in 2017 they reprinted Mike Trout's 2011 Topps card.
But
so like
the reprints, you can only use that title if you're a licensed brand like Topps or Upper Deck or Panini.
Exactly.
If for a brand producing cards in the market, you can use that title on a card you're producing for commemorative sake. Heck, 2019 Topps, they're doing a whole line that replicates. It's similar to the Cards Your Mom Threw Out line. That's just all reproductions of classic rookie cards that have come out in the last couple of years. And those are considered reprints, but for the commemorative sake. And on the backs, they have different backs, and they talk about the card. That's legit.
All licensed.
Those are all licensed.
All legit.
Those are all legitimate reprints.
Exactly.
But guys like Ryan, if you and I got together, like, hey Ryan, let's get together and produce some quote unquote reprints of the 86 Fleer Jordan just for a goof. Those would not be considered reprints. Those are considered counterfeits because we don't have the licensing, the permission to produce that card or those cards. Even if we turn them, even with on the back in small print saying, reprint, we'd still be like offenders of counterfeit production because we'd be making money on basically the images and the likenesses of the players and the team names and the team logos. So I don't buy any of the ACO stuff. Here's the thing. Not all sports car collectors are ethical people. Let's just focus on that. Let's just out the door. Like most people are by and large good. I can say that. Like on eBay, I know that. Like I have my feedback trend rate is like 4,000 plus. But and I have 100% feedback rate. I've dealt with mostly good people. Like the statistics are very much in our favor for good transactions. But there are some guys in the hobby that are unscrupulous. And so it ends up in the hobby and somebody got ripped off. So I don't like seeing the quote unquote reprints made by, you know, John Doe in his garage, like just
Right.
doing this just because he wants to like rip somebody off. This happens, you know, and so um
Yeah, and it
the
just creates more. Even if you know what's
problems.
going on with this situation,
Yeah.
it just creates more clutter and noise to cut through when you're
Yeah.
looking for things to purchase.
Right.
Because especially if you're looking for a popular player or a popular card or a popular product, these things are bound to show up. Um, and I always just put myself in the shoes of someone that's just sort of getting in the game, doesn't really know what's going on. They look up Michael Jordan rookie card, and they see something selling for $5, and they go, "Oh my God, what a steal!" And it's it's like I don't know, it just rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah. I mean,
But
it's a
it's out
problem for
there.
it's a problem for the hobby in the sense that, you know, if I'm new and I see this and I'm like, I'm gonna get it, and it's I say I pay $10 for something that shouldn't be worth 10 cents, and then I'm like, then I go to my friends, look what I got, and they're like, dude, you bought a fake card. Like, no, the guy said it was real. I was like, no, dude, nobody's gonna charge you $10 for a '86 Jordan. Sorry, like they're gonna charge you like $1,000 for it, right? So it's like that happens, and then it makes me feel like, oh my gosh, I got ripped off. Maybe this hobby's full of jerks. You know, maybe I don't want to be a part of it. So it's bad for the morale of the hobby that quote unquote reprints exist in that way. And the ACO stuff, like you said, I have to just filter that stuff through my searches. And I have to find a way to filter it out. I've got negative search all over the place, so I just filter this stuff out because I don't want to see it.
Mhm.
I just don't care. I don't care that somebody made an '89 Don Russ Frank Thomas card. Honestly, I don't keep it on your computer. I don't want to see it because it's not licensed. You know, it's just like a novelty thing. I've got some of that stuff in my collection because of the people that made them. I'm friends with them, so I'm like, yeah, I'd like a copy just so I know that I had some of your work. But 99.9% of it, I don't want to see it. I think it's just it's not good for the hobby when people the people that are making this stuff aren't supposed to be selling, and the people that are buying this stuff are they can't turn it around for profit if they wanted to. And so that stuff just it impacts the hobby negatively. And that would be both
Yes.
my opinion and also my perception of how it's going. So I hope I'm right.
I think you are right.
Okay. Moving on here. Let's talk about, you know, grading companies grade a lot of different things, and I think it's cool, like photos and balls and cards and flats and helmets, and they, you know, things are authenticated. But certain things I don't think need slabs because it's just kind of awkward. A sealed box of cards I don't think needs a slab. There's this company that slabs sealed boxes, and I'm like, man, what a weird thing to store. Do you get like a comic box and stand them upright, or do you stack them, or
No clue.
like
That's
this is just
very
a
odd.
odd kind of. See, if I had a grading company and I was slabbing sealed boxes, I would make little clamshells for them, and then they clamp shut, and then they're sealed, and then they're like they have the little like flip that's behind the sealed box, like as in its own little interior. That way you can stack the bricks like cubes, baseball cubes.
There
But
you go.
yeah, that would just if I were to doing the grading thing, that's how I would slab the sealed boxes thing. But I don't know how much there's a market for sealed boxes that are slabbed. I just have a hard time with this. This is a real weird. I'm still getting used to it. Like it's odd, and I don't even think this company that's sealing that's grading them. I don't even think they're around anymore. But Ryan, have you seen some of these?
I have seen some of them. I think the farthest I would go with grading things that are not individual cards would be a graded pack. I think that's kind of cool.
That is kind of cool.
Even then, it's a little cumbersome.
It is.
You brought up the issue of storage.
It's a,
A graded pack is obviously not a huge obstacle for storage, but
right.
it does bring up a couple issues. Um, but yeah, a slab box is
It's
something I
weird.
don't think I'd ever want to deal with. And I've had
So
like
weird.
when I was younger, I had a few like autographed photos of players that would come with authentication slips in the back. And that's all you need. You just need a little slip
That's all you
that
need.
says authenticated by so and so, maybe autograph from the authenticator or like the CEO of the company,
Right.
but you don't need like an encapsulated plastic thing, you know?
I think that all graded card cases should be the size of small refrigerators.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, that because it's super space efficient. You can stack the refrigerators. You can put at
Yes.
least 3 or 4 of them in a single room. So if you have more than 3 to 4, you just got to find another room. That's all you need is another room.
Easy.
So easy. It's easy. Just get it done.
Yeah. You know, the public storage place near my house is actually running a deal right now. So
Oh yeah, you can put at least
I'll
4 or 5 more in there. Easy.
yeah, there you go.
And if you need more storage, just get another room. Get another storage space. They should have also like every case that you open should have a smaller case within like those little tiny like ornamental like what do they call those? You remember those little like
Like a
dolls?
Russian doll or
Yeah,
something.
right. And it gets down to the small little case that holds the card. That would be really efficient. Great use of money for the manufacturer side point too.
Yes.
Moving on here. Auctions for sealed packs with guaranteed hits in them. This is really fishy stuff. Like really greaseball for me because
Oof.
how do you guarantee anything in a pack
You don't. You
without
don't.
opening it, pulling something and putting something back, resealing it and selling it unscrupulously? This is the question. And it's not rhetorical. Like I'm actually asking you like how would you guarantee that the buyer's going to get anything? You guaranteed superfractor 1 of 1 auto. Like, how can you do that? That's just completely. It's just, but what that is to me is a black and white lie to your buyer.
Mm-hmm.
Like right out in the open, it's like having a sign. It's like I'm lying! Exclamation point. With like one of those old like '60s hotel signs with the arrows pointing down and blinking. Like I'm lying to you right now. Auctions for
Yeah.
sealed packs with guaranteed hits is something that you automatically want to stay away from because there's no way to guarantee anything in a pack if it's been unopened.
But I see it all the time. You know, guaranteed, like you said, 101, guaranteed autographs, guaranteed whatever. And you literally can't guarantee anything in a pack of cards except for that you'll get
Cards.
some sports cards.
The only guarantee is
Exactly.
you're going to come away with some sports cards because if you buy something, you need to have something to show for it. Otherwise, it's considered gambling, and gambling is illegal. And so, if you're putting money toward anything, the guarantee is that you're going to get some tangible asset from an exchange for that monetary transaction. And if you're guaranteeing something you actually, in fact, don't know what you're going to get, you actually are lying to your prospective buyer, and it makes you look bad. And look, we all want to look good, right? The people like collectors, should want to look good to their prospective buyers and their prospective sellers and whatever else. We want to have pleasant transactions and pleasant interactions, and if it's good for the health of the community. Back in 2011, I started buying signed Frank Thomas cards that were unauthenticated on eBay. And I bought one, and then I was like, cool. And then another one surfaces, like, oh, I guess I got to get that one. This happened for like a month, and after a while, I was like, a lot of these are coming from the same seller. I'm not so sure that all these are real, or if any. So now I have a bunch of signed Frank Thomas cards, and a lot of them are, if not all of them, that block of them from that time anyway. But they're probably all fake. But you've got somebody producing something, knowing that there's a return value on what you're producing, knowing that also what you're producing is fake.
Yes.
And the I'm not saying the pack here is fake, but I'm saying the guarantee is illegitimate. The guarantee is the fake thing. The guarantee is the counterfeit. You can't guarantee anything out of a pack except for the guarantee that you're going to rip off a buyer. That's the guarantee. And so I just want to talk about this because I see this every now and then on eBay. Someone will sell a pack of Bowman Chrome and they'll say a guaranteed superfractor. It's like, well, if it's such a guaranteed superfractor, why don't you open it?
Yeah, exactly.
Why don't you
Why are
open
you
it and then
selling it
sell
for
the card?
$5?
Yeah. Well, it's actually like $300 is what they try to get from like hundreds of dollars. And so I just stay away from this stuff. There's certain things in the hobby I love and certain things I just stay away from at all costs.
Yeah.
And Dutch auctions, I don't do those. I did one once just for a goof, and it was a total letdown. I'd never do it again. Guaranteed sealed packs, custom and quote unquote reprint stuff. A lot of stuff we talked about in this podcast. Actually, I'm not interested in owning at all, touching, or even having anything to do with. So,
yeah, I mean, we have touched on a lot of the seedier aspects of the hobby,
yeah,
which are unfortunate.
right.
Um, but and I know we've said this before, but if you're going to buy something and you're unsure about it, it's always safe just to wait for a graded example.
All right.
Especially when you go back into the more vintage sort of cards.
All right.
If you're skeptical at all and it's a raw copy, it's not graded, perhaps best to stay away, you know?
Well, the thing is that grading doesn't completely remove the probability of buying something fake. I mean, grading companies are they're run by humans, and humans are error makers. Everybody is, myself included, you too. I mean, as humans, that's just how we are. We're not robots. So as graders come in and go, there's some graders that are more knowledgeable than others, and those that might not be as knowledgeable might accidentally authenticate a fake autograph. I've seen Frank Thomas cards signed with fake autographs slabbed by PSA over the years many, many times. Do I blame PSA? I don't blame PSA. I blame the hiring manager at PSA that hired the grader. That's kind of who I would blame, not the brand. I wouldn't blame the brand, though, because the brand is too big to blame, for probably a very small, tiny, little insignificant percentage of stuff that comes out that's not real. And so I don't go that extreme, like, oh, I'm not going to deal with PSA because they graded something that's not real. Like, I just realize, like, humans make mistakes, and we should understand that, and we try to just minimize the chances of making those mistakes as much as we can. But they're never completely removed, especially when we get into, like, the large volume type movers, right? So finding a slabbed Frank Thomas card that has a fake autograph on it is not completely uncommon. Obviously, I see more raw ones, but, it's just one of those things. You just have to, like, dodge and know your autographs as best you can. And the other thing, like you said, Ryan, if you're looking to invest high dollar figures in something, just do homework, a lot of it. Like, if you're buying a 52 Mantle, a 51 Bowman Mantle, a Ruth, Gehrig, make sure it's authenticated, make sure it's being sold by a reputable dealer. Talk to the dealer if you can. Maybe get them on the phone. Hey, I'm about to spend $50,000 with you. I'd like to get you on the phone. Can you want to discuss, like, aspects of the card? Have you seen it, like, raw before it was slabbed? How'd it look? And just discuss these things, because your money's, it's you work hard for it, and so you want to make sure that if you spend it in a very smart way. Especially with sports collectibles and sports collectibles hobby, the market is it's just full of unethical people. I mean, it's not, I'm saying full. I mean, just, it's kind of a loose term, because it's not full of them. There are just a lot of them in the market. But I believe that by and large, most people are basically good. And so, but every now and then you're going to run into somebody who's not, and you just have to dodge. You have to find a way to dodge that as best you can. Just do your homework, spend some time, do research, understand the card, understand the autograph, understand the seller, the grading company. Just, try to make the most out of your purchase the best way you can. So I'm going to leave it at that. I think that's a good ender for this podcast. Ryan, do you have any extra thoughts you want to share?
I guess one extra thought regarding our last little bullet point. There was a great short little ESPN documentary about some forgeries happening during the home run race between McGwire and Sosa in 1998.
Yeah.
I think it's on YouTube. Anybody can watch it. Perhaps we can link to it in the description for the podcast, but check it out. It's just like another angle on the kind of shady side of the hobby, and perhaps it'll make you a little more wary of things that seem dubious to you when you're trying to make a purchase.
So I blogged about that about a year ago. I've got it. It's embedded on a blog post. So what I'll do is I'll just link to it in an article, and you can go straight and watch it. It's Greg Marino. He's one of the greatest forgers of all time. In fact, some of his forgers are so good that they're kept in the Cooperstown. And of course, in Cooperstown, it's labeled, forgery by Greg Marino, that kind of thing. But he's so good at it that I wouldn't know if someone compared it with a real one. I wouldn't have I just wouldn't know. And so, and this is, I mean, some forgeries are really good. They just are. And sadly, it's at the loss. It's at the peril of the buyer. You have to just know. It's caveat emptor, right? It's like buyer beware. You know your stuff before you buy it. And so I think it's a good ender. Thank you, Ryan, for jumping on this podcast with me as always. And I like your feedback. I appreciate the stuff we talked about, and I hope that the listeners, hope you guys can kind of like feel a little bit more at ease with some of this stuff. Maybe feel a little bit more confident after listening to us, jabber on and on about some of this sort of unethical stuff in the hobby. Thank you for tuning in to the Radicards podcast on radicards.com. I'm your host, Patrick Reno, and until next time, enjoy collecting. If you like this content, please subscribe. Thank you. Enjoy collecting.